Hi, my name is Greg Levow. I'm from Agronomic Technology Corp. And I'm going to talk about our product AdaptN and how we use cloud technology to help improve the productivity of agriculture. Before I do that, though, I want to talk a little bit about nitrogen and nitrogen fertilizer specifically. We've heard this a lot today, so I'm happy to talk a little bit more in detail about it. Nitrogen fertilizer is one of the most required nutrients for crop growth. And without it, roughly half of the world's food wouldn't be here today. But nitrogen is very difficult to apply accurately, especially in row crops, primarily because of the effects of weather and soil characteristics and different farm management practices. And it's said that up to 50% of the nitrogen fertilizer that's applied is actually wasted because there's a lack of measurability. What we see is that for the farmer, when they are over-applying nitrogen, it's an excess cost, comes out of their profit, and it's also very damaging to the environment, both from a water quality and greenhouse gas emission standpoint. On the flip side, if a field is nitrogen deficient, that's a missed yield opportunity for the farmer, which is a critical issue. So our product AdaptN is web software that helps the farmer identify the optimal nitrogen rate on every field throughout their farm, throughout the season. And it's been recognized by leading companies and organizations like Walmart and the Environmental Defense Fund for being able to break the trade-off between the financial and environmental performance of those farmers. Now, this web software, and what it actually does, is it identifies an optimal nitrogen rate by looking at soil characteristics, including things like organic matter content, and farm management practices ranging from cover crops to crop rotations and manure applications. And then most importantly, it takes a real-time look at the weather that's actually impacting the nitrogen dynamics of the field to come up with a recommendation. And that recommendation is able to increase the profit for that grower while reducing the nitrogen loss. So from the farmer's perspective, one of the things we really see is that yield is what drives behavior, positive behavior. And if you look at the screen here on the left, we have a screenshot of one of our nitrogen recommendations that's accessed through the internet. And on the right, we have a picture of 2 ears of corn where you can actually see the yield difference that was created between the AdaptN nitrogen rate and the farmer's incumbent practice. So to close, I'll just mention that we really believe that science combined with software and data are the things that are really going to drive sustainable agriculture 2.0. That future is here now, and we're happy to be a part of feeding the future with AdaptN. Thank you.
So before I jump into what we do at Cool Farm, I'm going to talk a little bit about hydroponics. It seems to me that we spent pretty much the whole day talking about soil and soil-based agriculture, but in fact, hydroponics has been finding its way into our supermarkets more and more often than people realize. And I don't know if you are aware of what hydroponics is. It basically is farming without soil. And this is actually a very ancient technique. So the Mayans and the Inks were already using this. So this is not space-age technology. So the problem with hydroponic greenhouses these days is that we're basically looking at automation systems that control the whole greenhouse. And plants are not, plants are living organisms. So it's not the same as producing shoes, for example. They have special requirements. Each plant is different from another plant. Even if you are using clones, they might turn out differently. And obviously, the systems that are now in the market are very complex. They were designed by engineers to engineers, and the people who are using them are, in fact, farmers. So our solution is Cool Farm. Cool Farm is a smart system that is based on artificial intelligence, and it's used to control hydroponic greenhouses. So we're talking about hydroponics, bioponics, or aquaponics. And basically what we're doing is we have a smart controller that you plug to the sensors and the actuators in your greenhouse, whether they are pH sensors, conductivity sensors, the motors that open and shut your greenhouse, or the water pumps. And then the system is connected to our Cool Farm cloud, where everything happens. So basically the system is able to aggregate data from greenhouses all over the world, and by using machine learning techniques, it's actually able to learn how to better grow plants. And then it feeds this information back into the greenhouse so that the system is able to better manage and nurture your plants. So the major difference is that until now, most control systems are not even aware that the plants are in the greenhouse. So they work even if the plants are not there. And we are going a step further by actually creating a system that is basically a robot. It's aware of its environment, but more importantly, it's aware of the plants in the greenhouse, and it knows what they need and when they need it. When we first started this project, we were told that agriculture was a very competitive area, and it was very hard for new technologies to be introduced into this segment. But actually, we've had a lot of success, and we already have a lot of pre-orders from all over the world. So I think that farmers everywhere are actually starting to realize how technology can actually have a good impact on their production and their profitability.
Ernie?
Precision Hawk uses a very intelligent unmanned aircraft and cloud-based tools to collect, process, and analyze aerial data and high-quality aerial information for civilian applications, and particularly for agriculture. We do provide an aircraft, but it's important to note that we don't consider ourselves to be a drone company. We are an information company. And our product is a pipeline that bridges the gap between collecting that information and providing useful, actionable information into the hands of the decision makers at the right time. If you don't have the right information at the right time in the right place, it's not useful. Fundamentally, what Precision Hawk does is enable producers and decision makers to do more with less.
And then what we were talking about this at lunch before, and usually when you went into farming, at least when I was, there were people like me in 4-H or FFA. These guys are from robotics, from Silicon Valley, and space engineering. So it's sort of a different oyster for me. But tell me, I'll go backwards this time. Tell me, who are your customers, right? Who is it that needs this and can actually, you mentioned it has to be useful information, not just fun stuff to look at, but who can make use of this information right now?
So most of our companies are larger scale enterprise level organizations, or any organization that needs to make very quick decisions on a lot of information at once.
And can you tell me, can you break that down like, I don't per acre, what's a large corporation?
Like a large ag seed producer, a large hybrid producer, an organization like that. Some of the larger insurance companies, they're all very interested in processing very high quality information, turning it around very quickly so they can make decisions as quickly as they can without having to have a very constrained workflow or something. It's got to be very simple and easy to use for them, that they can distribute and have information go to stakeholders that may be widely separated.
Okay. I thought you mentioned yours is very, some of these guys are talking about wide range stuff. The greenhouses are very small. You're talking about they're on top of buildings, they're an old air. Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, hydroponic greenhouses can be found pretty much everywhere, particularly on places where it's hard to use the soil to grow plants. And there is a very interesting application for this kind of technology that is urban farming, and that's where we're aiming at. I mean, more and more people are growing fresh produce in the rooftop of their buildings, using greenhouses, under the ground, using all kinds of urban structures that are currently not being used for anything else, and recycling these places to actually grow healthy food closer to the people. And a lot of these people a lot of these farmers are actually coming from all sorts of different backgrounds, and most of them don't have a lot of experience in actual farming. So there is a lot of interest in this kind of technology so that it can help people to actually grow the food without having a lot of experience, and also to allow them to quickly change the kind of products that they are growing. Because if you have a small greenhouse in the middle of a city, for example, you cannot just grow the same stuff all year round. You have to grow different things depending on the demand, depending on what the public actually wants to eat at that stage of the year. And that means that you either need to be proficient in growing lots of different types of plants, or you need the right technology to help you do it.
Okay.
In our case, it's generally the agronomist who's advising the farmer on how much and when to apply nitrogen, and it's really all about risk reduction. We've heard a lot about risk today, and in farming, weather is the sort of big risk that's uncontrollable. So one of the things that's interesting in our world about nitrogen is that we've learned over time that the spring weather is really what impacts the true need for nitrogen as the crop starts to grow. And using real-time data allows us to sort of wait longer and longer until more of the weather has played itself out to make a more informed decision, thereby lowering that risk to the farmer. So in our cases, it's typically the large commercial farmer or an agronomist he's working with to get that number just right throughout the season.
And you had mentioned actually a lot of the current application is in the fall.
Yeah, there are some not ideal practices still going on, primarily in the Midwest, where a lot of the nitrogen is applied in the fall well before the crop is planted, which leaves it exposed to loss depending on what the weather scenario is. And as equipment is improving and as technologies like this are improving, we're starting to see an adoption of practices that get that nitrogen in the crop when it needs it, which is really not until sort of the mid to late spring when the crops really start to grow. So the goal is over time to shift that practice to reduce the exposure of nitrogen loss, and that's going to make the farmer more money at the same time. So it's really a win-win.
Mm-hmm. And most of the crops you're dealing with is corn, is the primary.
Corn right now, we're moving into wheat, and then we'll target other crops that use nitrogen as well.
Okay. Tin Fit, we were talking a little bit about satellite radio, and I mentioned I was working on a story with the lady who created Satellite XM. She had this crazy idea about 25 years ago that you could have satellite radio in your cars, and nobody thought that was crazy, and now it's in everybody's dashboard. So can you guys play futurist here for me for a few minutes? And, 10, 15 years from now, what do you see as, we were talking about tractors that were I'm going to call it autopilot. 15 years ago, people thought that was nuts. 10, 15 years from now, what's going to be best practices, common, just everyday procedures that nobody's really seeing right now? Ernie, we'll start back down there with you.
I see, first of all, that this technology is going to be commonplace. A lot of the hardware is going to be widely available, and people are going to look back and say, how do we operate without this? Very much like cell phones. Mm-hmm. Cell phones is a good example because it's a mechanism that people didn't think they'd need until they had it, and it's a great way to tie people and information together. And a lot of the technology that we work with is really all about tying that information together and having aircraft that can talk to the cloud, that can talk to the farm implements, that can talk to some of the advanced sensors that we heard about today, the biometric sensors and things like that on the plants. And have this as a complete closed-loop system so that all of this information can be processed and dealt with without having to have a human look at that information and say, oh, I think that we need to put nitrogen here. I mean, there are tools that can tell you exactly where that needs to go. And I think that's just going to become commonplace and become a complete part of the solution. And
tell me a little bit about exactly what you offer when the plane goes up and it goes over what, and I'm interrupting our futurist conversation just for a second, but tell people what they're looking at. The plane comes down and it lands, more or less, I mean, what do they buy from you? What they're getting is the ability to see their crop in a way that you can't get any other way. In a lot of cases, really what we have is a mechanism that gives you two benefits. One is, it's like when you go to the doctor because you have a cough before you get full-blown pneumonia. It allows you to see problems very, very quickly when they're still manageable. And that's incredibly valuable with the cost of inputs going up and the risks of over-applying. The other thing that it allows you to do is it really allows you to multiply, the people power that you have and the resources that you have. It allows you to cover a lot of ground very, very quickly and make decisions based on that information right away. Okay. Are we going to be seeing on every roof, the growth potential for Cool Farm, I think, would be sort of exponential. There's a lot of rooftops and a lot of big cities. So we're going to have a collective, I live in a high-rise in, I don't know, pick a major city, and we've got our own little collective farm going up there. Nobody really has to do that much to it. Is that what you guys are saying?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the way I see it, if we are running out of farmland to use, I mean, we need to start growing vertically. And we could definitely integrate the farming systems into our existing buildings, into our existing structures. So I definitely see a lot more urban farming appearing and popping out everywhere in the world. I don't believe that this is the only solution to solving the problem that we're addressing here today. I think it's part of the puzzle. Urban farming and small greenhouses can act as a buffer for when there are shortages or problems with the larger scale farming operations. So I definitely see it becoming widespread. And in terms of futuristic applications, I think there's a lot more cool stuff that we can actually do in this regard. I mean, integrating the actual smart system with, for example, health measurement devices on our bodies that can actually have an impact and an effect on what type of food we're growing and what type of nutrients we need in terms of health or in terms of if your kids have a lack of iron, for example, they should eat more of this, and then the system can actually adapt and grow different things depending on what you need. So I think there is a lot of room for improvement and technology to help us in this regard, definitely.
Also, really reshape, locally grown for your, your restaurant you go to. Yeah, it's locally grown. We grew it right up on the roof. Yeah, and yours is much more of wide-scale farming, and particularly the environmental aspect, I think, could really change over time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things in play, but as we look into the future, everything on the farm is going to be measurable. Everything. Inputs, outputs, the environmental impact, the finances. And I think one of the interesting things that's happening now is there's all this data that gets generated by these systems, and we're still sort of trying to figure out what to do with it as an industry and who owns it and how it can be exchanged. But ultimately, all these things will be connected. They can all analyze that data and hopefully make better decisions that are profitable and cause less of environmental impact.
Okay, for right now, we've got time, I think, for about one more question here. But we mentioned sort of the stuff that all this new stuff is coming at farmers. There's a lot of widgets, gadgets, apps. It all looks really cool. A little buyer's advice, please. What is it that you guys see out there? What do you know that can work, or what should people be looking for that would be a telltale sign that I can do this? And we'll go back this way this time.
I think there's two things I would look for. One is it based on real science, right? That's sort of the basis of all of this. Is it really going to help in the long run? And secondly, and I just mentioned data, so I'll go with that one, it's, what is the intent of the provider of that service? And is their intent to make the farmer more successful, or is it perhaps to sell something else down the road? And I think as farmers are inundated with these solutions, they need to consider both that scientific validity as well as that sort of independent approach to their success as they choose solutions, and they should be very rigorous about making sure things meet those criteria.
What's the detailed question to making cool farms work on let's just pick a rooftop? What do people need, if they want to do this, what do they need to consider in just a very nuts and bolts sort of way to, if that would work for them?
Actually, Cool Farm was designed to work in pretty much every environment, so it's able to adapt to different situations. But I think if you are designing a rooftop greenhouse, you should definitely have in regard who are you selling to? I mean, who is going to consume your products? Because that is going to define the kind of applications that you're going to install, the kind of structure.
Yeah, what you're going to grow, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that is the most important. And then you can adapt the sensors and the actuators depending on what you're growing. Because a lot of people these days are building these kinds of structures, and then they don't realize that they actually have to sell what they're producing. And I mean, that is actually the end game, that is the goal. So
right, yeah.
They should start by thinking about that.
Start at the end and work backwards.
Exactly. Yeah.
One of the key things with a lot of these technologies is it has to work within the existing workflows of the producers, of the farmers, of the growers. As you said, they're inundated with technologies, but these are very sophisticated, very busy people, and they do not want to have to become, a pilot or a data analyst or, a photogrammetry expert or something like that. What they want is the ability to have a tool that they can use, and at the end of the day, make a decision. And it has to work within that framework. It has to deliver what they need, where and when they need it. And I think that's, when we're talking about these technologies, that's really the key feature that has to work for widespread adoption. You just have to get what you need when you need it.
Okay, and that last question just on that, and then we'll wrap. Is this like, flat screen TVs. When I moved back to the United States in 2000, there was one flat screen TV in Best Buy, and it was $12,000. And now, seriously, it was. And now I think if you fill up your tank of gas 3 times at the same place, they just give you one. Is it that way? Are you buying high right now? Do people need to take a limited step into this because the technology is developing so fast? What would you advise on it?
The technology is developing very, very fast. New sensors, new technologies, new capabilities are coming online very, very quickly. I think that the hardware will definitely do that. You will be able to go out to a Radio Shack or your local electronics store and buy some equipment that gets you what you need. But the key thing is that the hardware doesn't matter. That's not what's important. What's important is what you get out of it, the information and the decision-making capability. And that's where the focus has to be.